Okay, go ahead, Carrie.
Mike McGrath, interview take 3.
Yeah, you know that, right? That's really practical. You know, so much has been talked about in the Hanoi prison experience about the quality of leadership. Guys like Robbie Reisner and Bill Lawrence and you know, the list goes on and on and on, Jim Stockdale. But one of the things, and I remember talking with George Coker about this, you know, and actually Orson just told the story of the night when he was feeling really broken and was whispering with guys, and CAG was brought in a completely broken condition. I just bumped the camera.
Okay, good.
Let me check that.
Thanks. At least he wasn't talking.
And the guys were trying to figure something out, and finally Orson said, "Oh, let me ask the old man." And he called down to Stockdale. I keep that in the camera. Called down to Stockdale and said, you know, "CAG, what do we do about this?" And years later, he runs into Stockdale at Camp Unity, and he's coming through, and he said, "I want to thank you. You saved my life that night," to Stockdale. And he said, "Orson, you don't know this, but you saved my life." I said, "That night I was really broken. I didn't want to go on anymore. And when I heard you guys say, we got to ask the old man, I knew I was needed." And that is a story of great, you know, the crucible. It doesn't get much more raw than that. One of the things that the academies, the military is always trying to instill is that great leadership goes hand in hand with great followership.
Yeah.
What is the role of the junior officers? How is it that you guys did what you did, supported and carried out, and how did you bring the units together?
Well, just your training. If you're a junior officer and there's somebody senior over you, you back them up. You don't argue with them. And you mentioned Percy, Bob Purcell. He was my senior ranking officer, and even a big room, there was 56 of us in one room one time. We were concentrated, barely enough room to turn around. And this guy's he's an Air Force captain, and we're all O3s, captains, lieutenants, and this guy was just, we'd all back him up and give our life for him. Now, I know other people have told you, but this really stuck with us. Bob Purcell, quiet, just and unassuming, but showed the greatest bravery of all when he kept another guy alive by risking his own life. And you've heard the story when he was in one end of a building. At nighttime, he would secret away food. He would climb through a hole in the ceiling, go down through the rafters, and there was another POW he was being starved. He was in irons and sitting in the room in irons with no food. And Purcell would go down and reach through the vent and drop him down food into his lap to keep him alive. Then he'd return to his own room. Now that was at great risk to his life, and he didn't have to do that. Nobody else in that building did that, but Bob Purcell did at great risk to himself for another POW. And that's the guy I got to live with for 2 or 3 years. And that self-confidence, quiet self-confidence was there. And there was 55 others that you're our leader. He was just a quiet leader, and we all respected him.
And Porter showed us a picture when he went back to Vietnam. He took a photograph of that room and that hole that Percy went through. And what you don't understand just telling the story, so maybe you can make it clear, they were 14-foot ceilings. They were the French.
Yeah. Usually, yeah. These to get up to these ceilings, they were high. In our homes, we'd call them a 9-foot ceiling. I don't think they were 14. I think they were more like 9 or 10. But you could take people and you could pick them up by the feet and hold them up, and then so now you got a 6-foot person with a 6-foot. Now you can get up to 10 feet and, you know, get an extra. So you could hold, you had to have a roommate to help you. You can't float up there, and there was nothing to climb in most of these rooms. So he probably had a roommate that hoisted him up there.
There's a word that, and I think I may have asked you about this the other day. If I did, let me know. But I remember there's so much talked about the bond of brotherhood between people. And I remember Ed Alvarez bringing up the word love when it comes to the military. And he said, you know, before his father was a Hispanic immigrant, and he came from a big family, and you know, they didn't have a lot of means or stuff, but there was a formality. And he said, you know, I never heard the word love from my father, but after being in Vietnam and going through what I did with my brotherhood, I use the word with, I will say to my children every time I speak, I love you, and it changed me that way. Speak to me about love.
I'd describe it the same as him. You know, most old families in the 50s and 60s, you all felt it, you all knew it, but in today's society, I guess first I had to get married to a good woman that brought these things out there. I became a hugger. I never hugged anybody in high school, and now I hug my sons, and I'm not afraid to say I love you to my sons and stuff. But you know, my dad, I don't remember him ever saying that to me. Well, you know, he was just a good role model, an engineer, and expected me to do the right thing, and I just did it. But we didn't use the word love. But we're more open now and more appreciative. And I guess I picked up some of that in Vietnam, that I'm more appreciative of my family and my friends that I made in there. But I don't tell them I love them.
Do you remember the I'm sure you do, the day of your repatriation?
Oh, sure.
Talk to me about that event.
Well, let me back up a little bit. I was in a jungle prison called Dog Patch up by China. We were under a triple canopy jungle. We'd been there for 8 months, and one day they just opened the doors and let us all outside. For the first time in 6 years, we could talk to the other guys in another cell. We're all outside talking. We said, "What's going on?" And they said, "Oh, they were just lying." They were smiling. The guards and the interrogators were smiling and said, "You know, nothing." We said, "Oh, we go home." And they said, "No, you never go home. You die here." And they said, "We're going home." And they said, "No, you're not going home." But they put us all in trucks right away, and they left the blindfolds off. Just going up to this camp, we were in blindfolds and manacles. Going down, nothing. We're in the back of the truck looking at the countryside, looking at the Russian missiles that are hidden underneath the trees. And they're feeding us Russian candy bars. They're killing their water buffaloes and making us steaks and gravy. And we said, "We're going home." And they said, "No, you never go home." But they're smiling. So we know we're going home. We came down to Hanoi. Within a day, they put us out in a camp and they said, "Stand in military formation." First time we had a senior ranking officer in front of us, and we were lined up in a military manner. Of course, we're just wearing pajamas, or some people didn't even have a top on, and just shorts or whatever. And this gal, we call her Hanoi Hannah, which was like Tokyo Rose, the broadcaster. And she was with some generals that came out, and they read the agreement using real words like the United States of America, instead of calling us the imperialist aggressor, you know, all these crazy communist terms. They used real words, and they read the end of the war statement, and they finished, and we're all standing there, and they said, "Well, aren't you going to sing and dance, and aren't you going to celebrate?" And we just all turned around, looked at the cameras that they snuck out of the windows, because they wanted some propaganda shots of us celebrating, and we just all walked away and walked back to our rooms without giving them the victory of a propaganda film. because they're always after propaganda. But shortly after that, it was within 2 months, we were released in groups of about 40. 40 in an airplane, 40 in the next airplane, 40 in the next airplane. C-41s flew into Guillam and took us out in groups of 40 until they got all the 566 of us were taken out of Hanoi. And those include the guys captured in South Vietnam, in Laos, Cambodia. All of us were concentrated in Hanoi and released in Operation Homecoming in February, March 1973. And, you know, none of us celebrated until we did, because we didn't trust them. They had broken so many words and promises that we didn't trust them. When the wheels broke the ground and we lifted off the airport in Hanoi, that's when we all cheered. So to your point, we had all this pent-up emotion, and we didn't let it out until the wheels went off the ground and went up into the wheel well, and we were airborne. That's when we all cheered. And several photographers captured that moment for several POWs when we cheered in the seats of the airplane. But we didn't trust them up until that moment, because they could renege back and forth in any agreement at a whim. So, yeah.
This opens up an opportunity to discuss something that I think you have a lot to offer. The returning warrior. You've been in how many days were you in prison?
5 years, 8 months, about 2,200 days.
Okay. You've been 2,200 days away from your country, away from your family, and a lot of former POWs talked about when they reached the Philippines, talking with each other, anxious, how's it going to go? I haven't seen my wife in X number of years, or my wife has left me, or, you know. And so many returning warriors today, they get back to their hometowns and they don't know how to, you had each other, you had the wall, the tap codes, so you share so much with a lot of people. But you did some, in some ways, remarkable things to reintegrate your family when you got home. Can you talk to me about what you learned about how to find your way and how your family can find its way with you? Because you did something in specific with your wife and boys.
Yeah, I did, and I did something unique with my family. When we all flown to Clark Air Force Base, and we all went through a protocol of 3 days where the dentists were working on us 24 hours a day to replace broken teeth, so that you met your family with a nice smile and nice teeth. And tailors were working on us 24 hours a day, tailoring uniforms, so you walked home with a nice uniform and a nice smile and emergency medical equipment. They really treated us nice for 3 days. Then we joined our families. Some guys came back to broken families. Their wives had moved on and said, I want a divorce, I want to go, which is overplayed, by the way. Of all of us who were married before shoot down, today 53% of us are still married to the original spouse. Only 47% ended up with a broken home, which is no different than society in general. But the press has overplayed this, of the people like Alvarez, whose wife had gone to Mexico and got a Mexican divorce. They want to apply that to all of us, but it doesn't apply to all of us. Most of us came back to stable homes. Now, as to my situation, I came back, I left the boys, they were 2 and 3. I came back and they were, 8 and 9. Now they're in 3rd and 4th grade, and they're happy to get a father back, and Marlene's happy to get me back, but we're rebuilding. We got to rebuild. We got to form a family. I'm going to shift here to the guys that had the most problems. Senior officers who left their kids when they were 10, they were POWs until 6 and 7 years later. Now they come back to that 10-year-old is now 17 or 18. Now think of the problem when a guy comes back, he wants to be in command, and he says, oh, that guy's got long hair, he can't have long hair. And the mother says, you're not cutting my son's hair. And he says, well, I want him to have a butch flat top, but he's got long hair hanging all over. And then he's got a daughter that he says, young lady, you're going to wear a brassiere. And she says, I'm not going to wear a brassiere. And here's this guy that comes back, and he is facing older teenagers who had not had a father figure for years, and those families had problems. That was tough to come back with older kids. I was lucky. My kids, I came back, they were 8 and 9, and they were ready for a father, and we just pressed on. So I just mentioned that some families, especially the older families, had problems because it's hard to interject your life into their lives after that long. But in my case, the unique thing that we did that no other POW did that I know of is my wife and I had very sincere talks and said, what do we need to rebuild our family? What do we need to help our 2 boys that, whether they're getting in fights in 4th grade or they're having troubles in studies or this or that, and how can we get things to settle down and form a family? And we decided to take all of the military leave they gave us and all of the, saved leave I had, and we took the kids out of school for 7 months. And California said, well, you can't do that. That's against the rules of California law. I said, well, we'll talk about it when I come back in 7 months. Meanwhile, we're going to be in a motorhome on the road, and you'll never find us because we're traveling to Canada, the national parks, we're going skiing, we're going fishing, we're going hunting. We're going to go everywhere, and we're going to report back into California, where I'm going to get back into school, and the kids are going to get back into school. So we traveled and hunted and fished, and we became the strongest family unit you can imagine, where those boys and I were catching salmon, trout, and we're hiking in wilderness areas and learning to fly fish. We were doing everything. And with the understanding, when I took those boys back, that they had to finish out the last year they were out of, and they'd be a year behind the rest of their lives age-wise, but they'd always be bigger, stronger, smarter, and the rest of their lives. And sure enough, that happened. We got back. We were a unit. We were strong. We were one. The kids were number 1 in their class with straight A's the rest of their lives. Nuclear engineering, chemical engineering, computer engineering. These guys have not had a problem on the day of their life, nor has our family, because we made the tough decision to do something for the good of the family. Even though it was against the rules, we did it for our family, and we're glad to this day that we did it. And everybody else looks at us and says, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd thought of that. But, they didn't. The guys that had real problems, say a guy's been gone for 7 or 8 years, and he comes back, and after about 30 days, he's back with the wife, the kids are going back and forth to school, and after about 30 days, he says, I got to get back to my squadron. I got to join my unit. Everybody else is flying, and I'm not flying, and I'm missing my opportunity to get promoted to the next rank, and I got to get back to flying my airplane. And she's been waiting for 6 or 7 years, and after 30 or 40 days, this guy wants to go back to work at 7 in the morning and come home at 6 at night, and she's been waiting for 7, 8 years. Think of the strain. What does she feel that this guy wants to go back and fly an airplane instead of build a family like I did? So that happened to a lot of families where guys felt, I've got to get back, I've got to serve my country, I've got to get back to the squadron, I've got to get back to my airplane, I've got to press on. It was a bad, bad mistake for those people that did that.
Really beautiful, Mike. One of the things this draws up for me, because so many returning warriors confuse leadership with control. Wait, you asked a question that was empathetic. How does my wife feel? How do my kids feel? You said, I can lead in a new direction that'll be good for everybody. Not I want to control them, but so there's a lesson to be learned here in leadership about leadership isn't just applying your will to the situation. Leadership is a quality of listening. CAG demonstrated the ability to listen. he knew under the threat, he was certain he would get court-martialed when he got back for altering the code of conduct, the military code of conduct. But he did it for you guys. So speak to me if you can, because part of the applications for this, Ev and Tammy Alvarez are working with PTSD and returning warriors, and you know, one of the questions Ev asked when I told him about the project was, you know, I think our stories can help these kids that are struggling. I think we have lessons here. You took your familial leadership and you understood it in a way. So if you can speak to me about these ingredients of not, don't confuse leadership with control.
Yeah, I've, boy, well, I boil leadership down to just a couple of words: do the right thing. I mean, it's very simple, and the right thing is, you know, back off and control, lead by example, lead with integrity, lead by, you know, do the right thing in everything you do in your life. All these things go into leadership, but I remember the Navy definition of leadership 50 years ago was accomplishing the Navy's mission through people. That's pretty simple, but it applies. The mission may be to integrate the family, to show the kids the right way, but you work with people, you work with your wife, work with your kids, work with everybody around you, and work with people to accomplish leadership, to accomplish your mission. I know I'm talking around in circles, but you've got to lead by example, and you got to do the right thing.
Beautiful. You know, we're starting to get hard light in that back window. We could put a sheer over it because it's not in either of our cameras.
I don't see it in any of the cameras, so I think
Okay.
we're still okay.
You think we're okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Let me check our timing. I'm going to ask you, sir, if you would, I know that it was often something that was quoted in the camps. Do you remember the poem High Flight? Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth.
I have never memorized that flight.
I don't need you to. If you could look up at camera when you can. Do you need some reading glasses, sir? Some here.
No, I can.
His reading,
Oh,
right?
okay, good.
Okay.
You can read without him?
And if you could lower it so that it's, yeah, that's good.
Okay. Okay, you've asked me to read High Flight. This is one I didn't memorize, but my roommates memorized it, and we passed it around. But I was more interested in memorizing Shakespeare's soliloquies. So if you asked me to talk about Shakespeare, I could say, you know, I've slipped the surly bonds of earth, and all those things. But this is one that my roommates often stated, and it really, this is written by this. I think his name was, I don't have his name here, but it's like Gillespie McGee, and he was a pilot in World War II, and he wrote this, and it strikes the heart of every aviator. Every aviator knows this, or have heard it, but it hits so many high points, and it's called High Flight, and it's, oh, I've slipped the surly bonds of earth, I'm gone, and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed, and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds, and done 100 things that you have not dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting wind along, and flung my eager craft through the footless halls of air. Up, up, the long delirious burning blue, where never lark nor even eagle flew. And while with silent lifting mind, I've trod the high untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touch the face of God. This is so beautiful because I've done that, especially in a jet aircraft with lots of power. And you know these big round cumulus clouds that real puffy? They look nice and peaceful, but you don't want to fly through them because there's a lot of turbulence inside those things. But one of my best memories in life is having a high performance jet fighter, and I'm up there and I'm pulling around those clouds. I hope somebody's not coming this way, but I've chased around those clouds up there at 20 and 30,000 feet with a high powered jet engine, blue skies up above, and I pulled around those things. And I still have memories of that just are a joy to me today. And this poem talks about it, doing things that nobody's ever dreamed of, chasing these beautiful puffy clouds around. And I mean, it's just a beautiful memory in my life that I got to do as a Navy jet pilot that nobody else will get to do because they'll never get that. Only a few people get to fly those powerful jet fighters. And I got to do it.
Beautiful, sir, beautiful. Bill, you got that clean, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's fantastic. One of the things that so many have talked about was how important humor.
Oh,
Talk to me about humor.
humor is
Hold on
really
a second,
important.
I'm just gonna stop you down a tiny bit. Okay?
Okay, could you repeat that, sir?
Yeah, you ask about humor. They destroyed our integrity, or they destroyed everything they could. They wanted to get us the lowest, live like animals. They wanted us to beg for anything, but they destroyed a lot of things, but they never destroyed our sense of humor. And especially in the pilot world, whether it's in the bar and you're talking with your hands, or you're telling off-color jokes or whatever it is, and pulling pranks on each other. Pilots pull April Fool's Day jokes on each other all their lives, but we have a sense of humor, and they never destroyed our sense of humor. And we made each other laugh. Some of them are off-color humor, so I'm not going to mention those things. But the subtle sense of humor, like here's one that I remember these lines of communication that came between camps, and I was a communicator, so I would get the word, and then I'd turn around and I'd brief the rest of the people what came from this camp. Then we'd tap on the wall and we'd pass it around our camp. And I just remember this one line that it's humorous in that we had Fred Cherry, who was a black pilot, but he'd been stationed in Japan. So he'd picked up, Oxamio and Domarigato and a few of these Japanese words. So Terry knew a few of these things because he'd been stationed in Japan. Then we had another POW named Terry Uyama. Well, he's of Japanese descent, but he grew up in Texas, and he didn't speak a word of Japanese. So here's the tap code. So here's the tap coming through, and we would all get this, and we write it down on a plate, and I turned around to the thing, and I said, we have news from the next camp, from the zoo. It says Fred Cherry is teaching Terry Uyama to speak Japanese. And everybody just broke down in laughter. So here's the black pilot teaching the Japanese pilot how to speak Japanese. But that's just a pilot sense of humor that we just laughed at. So we have, of course, now but you got to be careful because from this year to this year, are you telling joke number 22 or joke number this joke for the 23rd time? You got to be careful about repeating your jokes because everybody remembers them, but you forgot you told it already.
I'm not a funny person, so if I ever say anything that's funny, I keep repeating it again. My wife says you can't keep repeating it just because you got to laugh the first time. And it's like for some reason that doesn't. Were you part of there was an evening, one of the wonderfully anecdotal demonstrations of humor in the camps involved bombing the Cabbage Patch. Were you part of that?
No, I was not part of that. I've heard the story, and it's a humorous story. It makes sense to me because my worst time in life there was they ran out of food, and we had boiled cabbage for twice a day for 4 months in a row. We lost weight rapidly. We had a little bit of rice and a bowl of boiled cabbage. A little bit of rice and boiled for 4 straight months. So boiled cabbage is not in my vocabulary. So that story about, send the bombers in, but please bomb the Cabbage Patch. That is a good story. Yeah, I'd like to bomb that Cabbage Patch too.
Yeah, it was a great one. It was really great. The Vietnamese, as you said, understood how to reduce you to the barest minimum of yourself. And what's remarkable, and I think feeds directly into, is it Commander Mitchell's findings?
Doc Mitchell.
Yeah, Doc Mitchell's findings was, and everyone had a different name for it, you would get reduced down to this core of nothing, but somewhere in the dark, in the silence, in the memories of your past, whether it was that first tap through the wall or whatever it is, each and every one of you would find some ember. Remember George Coker talking about being suspended for day after day after day, and he would learn to disassociate from the pain in the beginning. He could go for a couple hours and disassociate his mind. But over the time, he grew more delirious until in the end, he couldn't do it at all. But he couldn't remember his name, he couldn't remember his family. But he remembered one thing, and one thing only, and he held on to it, and it's what he clung to. And it was the first line he was an Eagle Scout. It was the first line of his Scout's code, which was, I will do my very best. And he clung to that piece. And I would say today, George Coker is still formed by that very, if you ask George, who am I? He will say, I begin with this. And each former POW has described this process, almost alchemical process of being put in the cauldron and crucible and reduced down to the barest minimum, and then finding, and some have called it faith, some have called it, Stockdale called it Epictetus, the Stoics. But from that first tap, that first connection, and I experienced this in you, sir, that each of you that I've met has built, you know who you are. You've gotten down to this essential piece of self, stripped of the ideas of our heroism, of our invulnerability, invincibility, all these other things, the real true sense of self. And so when your first comrade reaches out and says, we're in this with you, you knew what they were saying. You knew their pain was your pain, and your pain was their pain. Speak to me if you can. Have you reflected on that process for yourself, sir?
No, but I guess, I put a lot into sports. You had sports. And I was a wrestler. And I remember as a freshman in high school, everybody beat up on me. I was reduced to nothing. I was pinned by everybody. I was not humiliated, but I was just beat up fair and square because I wasn't very good and everybody was better than me. And I call it the agony of defeat. But by my sophomore year, I got a letter. And by my junior year, I was a district champion. And later at the Naval Academy, I was captain of a national wrestling team, and I went to the national championships. So I rose from defeat to the glory of victory. But being defeated, I was defeated in Vietnam, and I was the lowest, and I knew I could get out of it. And I remembered my coaches saying, get up off your back, go whip that kid, get in there and fight again, don't give up. All that encouragement I got all my life, I was able to dig it up and encourage myself and say, get up off your back, learn to sit up, learn to do push-ups. You know, I couldn't move for the first few months, but within a year, I was doing 100 push-ups on a broken arm. Just ignored the pain. I was doing push-ups, but I just did that through sheer pain because my other roommates were exercising, and I pushed myself through that too. So I guess we're all different. We all pull out some inner strength somewhere, but sports was important to me, that I had competed and I had won and I had lost, and I think that was a valuable lesson for me.
And you know, anecdotally, as I mentioned to you, I wrestled as well, and the one thing I always felt about it was, it's not a team sport. If you lose, there's no one out there. You can't say, oh, well, the team did that. It's you, one-on-one. It's rise or fall.
Yeah.
You can't hide from your...
Team sports are valuable, but individual sports are valuable too. They're both important.
So many of the former kids, make sure I'm good. Carrie, we're due out at what time?
Well, we had said 2:30,
Okay, so,
so that doesn't hit traffic.
And I'm free, so don't worry about me.
thank you, sir. Let's see, I just lost my... What was I gonna ask you? Oh, yeah. So many of the former POWs have talked about what it meant that, you know, we back in the country thought, oh, you know, they've been shot down, they're taken out of the game, they're no longer, they're now in prison, like that stopped your lives. But for you, you know, I remember, I think it was Harlan Chapman's, you know, when he returned, a Marine came up to him and said, welcome back to Marines, or maybe it was it Harlan?
It was Harlan, you're right.
Yeah. Said, welcome back to Marines. He said, I never left, sir. Thank you, but I never left, sir.
Yeah, that's true.
And
That's
this battle behind bars you fought every day, you didn't stop being warriors. You did not.
no.
Talk to me about it.
Well, you're absolutely right. You know, we continued. We discussed how can we continue to resist, but we were smart because we never lost our faith in America, and we thought, well, how can we resist? But we weren't stupid. Now, if you're stupid, you openly resist. You draw their attention. You look at them with hatred in your eyes, and they're human beings. If they're looking at you and you have hate in your eyes, they can read your eyes just as well as you can or anybody else can. So you've got to learn to look neutral. You may have some ideas behind your head, well, I'm going to do this, do that, but you don't do something stupid, or you don't insult them, or you don't yell at them, or you don't, because you're going to get beat up and you're going to get hurt. You've got to learn to bend, and you got to be neutral, but behind then we're still resisting. Now you're thinking, okay, they gave us 2 cigarettes a day of all things. Even if you were being tortured, there was a cigarette break. They'd say, okay, drop your arms. Here, you have a cigarette. And they give you a cigarette. Well, we don't smoke, but we take it, we light it, just because, oh, they're leaving us alone for 20 minutes. And, we just let it burn down. But this was in their book, their regulations. Each POW must get a ration of 2 cigarettes per day. But none of us smoked because we were pilots. But we would take the cigarettes and we'd light it. We're supposed to do a chain smoking, pass it around. But then we'd take the cigarettes, say, well, we'll take the cigarettes and we'll destroy the cigarettes to help destroy their economy. So they produced them, so we'll destroy them. That was our symbol of resistance, just with cigarettes. But then we say, well, now we can dissolve that tobacco and make brown ink, and we use our homemade pens, and we can write messages and do studies and stuff with homemade brown ink from dissolved cigarette tobacco. But also we're destroying their economy. So, I mean, we were thinking of things to do as best we could. We didn't have much, but yes, we were continuing to fight the battle and resist.
And how did that work to, was that did it work to further increase the bonds between you? That you knew each other, like that you could figure out ways to help each other understand.
Yeah, that just comes naturally. You want to help each other, especially if somebody's hurt. You want to help them. You want to give them whatever you can, food or support or help them. But those bonds just develop naturally in friendship. And sometimes you're oil and water. You know, your personalities don't match. And you're not going to be friends later. I mean, that's part of life. But most of the people you make strong friends. Today, some of my best friends are the guys that I roomed with the longest and shared the most in common. We're still sharing today events. But there was one guy that my roommate and I, we didn't like him. And so we didn't like him when we got out, but our personalities clashed. So not everything's hunky-dory. Most of the guys are good and you make friendships with, but there's a couple of personalities that just can grate on you.
Orson tells a story of a humorous one where there was one guy in his cell who was a griper, just gripe, and he outranked him, and he finally said one day, I know gonna get court-martialed for this, but if you whine one more time, I'm gonna kick your ass. And the guy laughed.
Well, while you're right there, I can tell you a story of the guy we didn't like. There were 8 of us in one room. He got moved in, and all of a sudden, previous rooms he'd never been senior, so everybody exercised. But now he got in our room, there's a mix-up. He's senior, so there's 8 of us in there, and we're all exercisers except him. He wants to sleep in at 5:30 in the morning when it's cool, and we want to exercise because we got to get our exercise done before they can catch us, because they're going to open the door at 7, and it's illegal to exercise. They don't want us to be strong. They want us to be weak. So we're at 5:30 in the morning. We're exercising to keep strong. Even though we're skinny, we're doing push-ups and sit-ups and everything we could to keep strong. But he wants to sleep in. So all of a sudden, he's senior, and he put out the order, I don't want anybody to exercise because I want to sleep. I want to sleep in this cool time of the morning because the rest of the night was bad. And you can't exercise because that disturbs our sleep. So he's senior. Is that a legal order? The rest of us, so here's 7 guys. We're up at 5:30. We can't exercise because he's ordered us not to. And so being pilots, we just folded up our mat, and then we went over and we sat down around him. So he's sleeping, and he's got 7 heads around him, sitting there just like this for the next hour, just watching him. We're about 2 feet from his face, don't say a word, and we're just looking at him. And he'd wake up, and so here's 7 guys just sitting there looking at him. And this lasted for 2 or 3 days, and he finally says, okay, guys, all right, let's talk about this. He says, I want to sleep, and you guys want to exercise. It's clear this is not going to work. And we were obeying his order, don't exercise. So we talked it over, and we came to an agreement. He says, okay, you guys can exercise, but do it quietly, and I'll sleep. And we said, okay, that's a good thing. We don't talk, we don't grunt, we don't make noise, we don't thump. We just do our exercise, do it quietly, and let him sleep. So we reached a compromise. And but you can see that was turning into hatred. He could sleep while 7 other guys could sit there and look at him with hatred. It just wasn't going to work. But we did reach a compromise, and then we all made friends, and we were okay.
Beautiful. That's just a great story. Anecdotally to that, I think you'd appreciate this. Jim Mulligan was saying that as he was 43 months in solitary, that there were many times when he thought the person that back in his memories that he hated the most, he would have given his left arm just to have 5 minutes with him.
Yeah.
So there's a way in which, but you found a beautiful way to work that out there. Let's see, we want to do our tap code. But I kind of want to come to the conclusion with asking you a couple questions. First of all, actually, I want to, I don't believe, Carrie, do you remember, we didn't get the story of Mike's dad's Porsche on camera the other day, right?
I don't think we did, no.
And I do want to have a bit to edit into that scene when you're polishing it, so otherwise the audience isn't going to know what this is. So if you could tell me the story of your dad's Porsche, like, so that I can use some of that language during that scene.
And there's so many subjects. Did you ever want to mention like Hanoi University and this learning? Everybody learn a lot of languages. I know it's just an idea.
Yeah, correct me.
We did get that at the drawing.
Yeah.
Okay,
when you were at the
that's
drawing
enough then?
table, I made a
Okay,
point of doing
okay.
it, and I thought that was a nice environment to do it, rather than the formal.
Because a lot of
interview.
guys learn French and German and Spanish and even we tried Russian. Some guys knew a little bit of Russian, but you've already got it. I'm just throwing up an idea.
Yeah, no,
Right.
no, I want to, you know, let's just take another pass at it. And the only caveat is I'll say that you talked about learning Spanish and how it took you into Ecuador and everything else, so that connection has already been made on camera. But I think it would be good overall to say because there were a lot of remarkable things. I mean, people were telling me,
Yeah.
Bob Shoemaker made a.
Well, you already have all that, so we don't need to do it. I just do it. Okay, yeah. No, you got it from other guys, and everybody wanted to design a house, and everybody, you know.
But talk a little bit about it in your own words, that whole experience.
Well, we didn't use the term Hanoi University until after we got home, and then as the years went by, we started using the word. Well, I learned that in Hanoi University, and you know, one thing I heard, this isn't verified, so I can't put it as my facts, that some guys learned some subjects so well that from their roommates that they challenged the University of California and got an oral exam from a professor, a written final exam, and got some college credits for certain subjects that they became proficient in Hanoi. And that's where we said, well, I got that at Hanoi University. So just in general, a lot of people, they didn't have their minds inactive, they had their minds active, learning from their roommates in a variety of subjects. Mine, I like German and I like Spanish. Those are my subjects. I liked them. And so I really set my mind to it. Other people like math and architecture. I remember mathematics was very popular and French was very popular. But I'd already taken French and I didn't like it. So I stayed away from the French lessons. But some people really got into mathematics and thermodynamics and some technical courses. And they kept their minds active in what we call Hanoi University in a variety of subjects. Oh, I will mention that most of the rooms we had the nightly movie. Has anybody told you about the nightly movies? Oh, if you're really lucky, if you had one of your guys who'd been an usher in high school at the local theater, because they knew the movies. And we had two guys. We had Jerry Venanzi and Dennis Chambers. They had been ushers in high school, and they knew the movies. So every night, everything settled down, they'd sit at the corner of the room, and you could go play bridge, or you could study Spanish, or study one of the other subjects, or you could go down for the nightly movie. You go down to this end of the room, and the guy that told the movie had free reign. And of course, he had to ride in horses, and he had to have the hero kiss the horse goodbye, and he had to have the woman with good-looking body, and you know, and a train robbery, and I mean, he could write the action plot any way he wanted to, and he could make a thriller that everybody's on their edge of their seats wondering what was going to come next. In other words, they were storytellers, and this happened in several rooms where you had the nightly movie when everything settled down, and they would tell the movie for the night. And so we had some really pretty exciting stories. Of course, you had to have John Wayne in there, you know, and Charlie Bronson and a few of the heroes. But so anyway, that's all part of our mental exercise to keep our minds alert. And Hanoi University and the nightly movies was just part of our entertainment.
That's amazing. You know, I had heard that John McCain was a good storyteller that way.
Well, I'm sure he was. I didn't get to live with him. Now I'll tell you one more thing we had. I had 2 years of a running poker game where it got so popular that we had 2 tables of 7. And these 7 players, I was the poker chip maker. We could take wet dough, we'd take the innards out of our bread. They give us this bread that wasn't cooked. So it was yucky dough in the middle because it was all toasty on the outside. So we'd strip out this yucky dough in the middle of the bread loaf and we'd roll it out smooth into nice little thin strips. Then we'd take bottle caps and we would cut out chips, and we could inlay them with different colors, like cigarette ashes, and we could make them different sizes and different colors. And what you do is you lay them out on a bedboard, and all through the night, every 15 minutes, we turn over the chips. We turn them back because they want to dry like this. From flat, they want to curl up like this. So you turn them over, and they flatten over, and then they turn up the other way. So you keep them going for 2 or 3 days till they're perfectly dry. And then you use your homemade cards and you play poker all hours into the night and nickel, dime, quarter, 3 always limit. Well, after 2 years, I went from $150 down, and then the second year I ended up with $43.25 up. Other guys ended up hundreds of dollars down, and other guys hundreds of dollars up. And the only requirement was, when we got out of that big room, 56 people, the only requirement was, well, every night we had to balance the books. And Jerry Gurnt was really good with numbers. So he'd balance the books every night, then we'd go to sleep. Then we'd start the next day. And when we got out, the losers sent in their money to Jerry Gurnt, Soaring, Wisconsin. He was the only family in town. It was a crossroad in Wisconsin, a dairy farm. And every winner sent in their winning. So I said, well, I'm plus $43.75. And a couple of months later, I get back a check, $43.75. And all those guys that lost paid, and all those guys that won got paid. And we balanced the books after we got out of Hanoi. So I don't know if you knew about the running poker game.
No, sorry.
And the movie. So now you know it wasn't all stress. The reason we could do this is because the last 3 years they didn't torture us. They backed off. After Ho Chi Minh died, torture stopped. They left us alone. They gave us decks of cards and said, do not cause problems. We didn't. And they left us alone, and we waited out the end of the war with them leaving us alone and our cards, and that's why we could do it. So this wasn't hard times. It was really waiting out the war.
Jim Stockdale told me a story that his dad told him about this time. That I guess it was Rabbit who was the torturer, who did the ropes. And after Ho Chi Minh died and the torture stopped, Rabbit no longer really had a function in the camp. And apparently Commander Stockdale admitted to a certain respect for Rabbit. He was good at his job. He knew how to do it without breaking limbs, and it was his apprentices actually who scared him a lot because they did not have his precision. But when I guess Rabbit got in charge of maintenance, and one day he was hanging a door, couldn't do it by himself, and he goes over and gets Jim out of the cell, and Commander Stockdale said, I'm just standing in the yard in the sun working with this other man on this common task. And I realized how, like the incredible irony of it, that we can be working together on this task and talking and communicating. And so this time when you now have a little more relief from the hardships, and that, it's a beautiful story about the poker. Orson was telling us today about a guy who, I guess there was a $1,500 limit on that game.
We didn't have a limit.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, you couldn't
Well,
lose?
it was nickel, dime, quarter, three raises. That was our limit, 3 raises. But the amount of debt you could get, that was up to you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, they had a game where there was a $1,500 limit on the debt, and one fellow lost that And he would mope around and mope around. So one Christmas, they gave him $1,500 credit. He came back in and within a couple of weeks was already back up to $1,500. So he wasn't a good poker player, clearly. So we've touched on the Hanoi University and, and I've heard remarkable stories. I mean, it's really something. I mean, Bob Shoemaker was telling me that I think Stockdale and Jerry Denton were trying to figure out the mathematics of the quarter tone and half tone on the scale, and they derived the exact mathematical ratio.
One of the things we did in our room is we invented our own slide rule. So we got 2 pieces of bamboo. They're leaving us alone, and this bamboo. We just made a slide rule out of these 2, and you keep experimenting with mics. Like you take 2 times 2 on this one times 4 on this one will give you an answer of 8 on this one. And well, you just keep developing a slide rule, and we made a very, very accurate slide rule. That mathematically, we could multiply anything with the little tiny raisy cut marks on this. If you had 8 times 64, it'd give you right to almost to the exact number. So that was one of the things we did in our room. So there was lots of things like putting people in a tank to try and determine their body weight, and how much water they displaced. So there was a lot of the things that we tried to do with our very limited ability. Because the Vietnamese didn't give us much. They wouldn't give us anything. So we had to kind of come up with these things on our own.
That was, I think, Bob Shoemaker's idea was how to figure out how much to weigh, each of you weighed. I think he came up with that.
We tried that because they did have water tanks that we could fill up with well water and get it right to the top, and then have a body get in and hold him underneath, hold his body into there, and then when he took him out, we'd figure out how much water he displaced. So we did, there was a lot of experiments trying to figure out, and they'd have a big, and I remember we had a measure in my room, and we'd figured it out by centimeters and meters that I had a 29-inch waist. Well, I haven't had a 29-inch waist since junior high school, so I was really skinny, and we all were, but we could measure things. So we were engineers. We wanted to measure things and weigh things and figure out how things worked, and we just did the best we could.
I wonder whatever happened to that slide rule. That's a piece of. Can you imagine seeing that in a museum?
Yeah. I'll tell you another thing I did is since I was an artist, I got one of the great big sheets of they gave us 1 sheet of toilet paper per month. You're supposed to use a little square at a time to make it last a whole month. Well, the guys gave me this whole sheet of paper, and I had stolen their ink balls, their iodine balls to make ink, and I had my homemade pen, and I drew the human skeleton this big with every bone in the body that we could think of between all of us. And 2 of my guys, the Air Force Academy guys, Tom McNish and Don Spoon, later became doctors. They became medical doctors. So they were 2 of the guys in the room, but between all of us, I had every bone in the drawing that had this skeleton, and I had every bone in the body labeled, like the knee bone and the humerus and the ulna and all of these on and on with little engineering arrows to each body. I had it all drawn, and we were using it for studying parts of the body, like a medical office. And they later got into medical school and became doctors. But unfortunately, the Vietnamese found it, and they were fascinated with us, so they took it away from us. So some Vietnamese got that. He's got that in his medical wall there in North Vietnam. Probably my skeleton is on his wall today.
I'm just loving this reminiscing with you because you do have this anecdotal library of these. Did we tell you the story of Shu's the painting of his famous photograph? Did we tell you that story?
Which one is that?
You know the famous photograph of him with the 2 Vietnamese?
Oh yeah.
And where
he's walking.
Yes. So years later, he gets a call from, I believe, someone who was a major, and says, "I have something I would like to give you." And he shows up at his house and says, "Admiral, I was in the Vietnamese jungle and came across a dead."
Oh yeah, I got that story. Yeah.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Let me tell you a story. I don't tell this very often, but It was in Dogpatch, it was dark, and they gave us these little lamps of oil, about that big around, and you could light it, and they let you light it every, they give you a ration of oil that was good for a month. And you could just have this little glow. It was enough that you could carry it around in the building and go from one end of the building to the other. Remember, the pitch black in there. And one time I had this beautiful bedboard. It was, just think of something this wide, but polished, completely smooth. And it was a nice bedboard. And I talked the guys in. I said, if you'll let me use up about a half a month's ration of oil, I'll draw you a beautiful Vargas nude. Now, you remember from the 1950s, Vargas? Vargas was a famous artist that his nudes, he was from Peru, and his nudes were these beautiful, impeccable, beautiful girls were in Playboy magazine, if you remember the Vargas nudes. Well, I remembered this from high school Vargas in the Playboy magazines. So the guys gave me I was able to turn up the light, and I drew this beautiful full-length Vargas nude. My imagination was just like Vargas. She was a thing of beauty. Well, what I did, I borrowed guys' little photographs some of them had gotten, and I got ideas for hair and face and features and different things for different photographs. And this one guy, Dave Ford, one day he's walking by and I'm working, and he looks over and he goes, "Oh," he says, "how dare you do that?" He says, "That's my wife." And he was all mad at me that I'd drawn his wife, because his wife, he had a picture of his wife, but she had a nice hairstyle. I had used his hairstyle off his wife's picture on this Vargas nude, and he took it as an insult that I had drawn a nude picture of his wife. I said, Dave, that's just her hair. That's not anything else. I had to calm him down because I made this beautiful Vargas nude. Well, a few months later, they moved us out in January. We left Dogpatch, and I had to leave the nude because it was a great big plank. It was, hundreds of pounds. So we covered her up with plastic. We put some rocks on it, and we covered her. And thinking, well, someday. So here's my theory. I think when they tore down the Dogpatch and stripped it out of all those boards, some general cut off that plank, and he has that Vargas nude in his office today. Somebody in North Vietnam has a beautiful Vargas nude. It's probably against everything communist, all their ideology, but they have an American-drawn Vargas nude somewhere in their repertoire.
Oh, fantastic. So just so I have a little bit of voiceover about your dad's Porsche, tell me a little bit about that story.
Well, my dad was a mining and metallurgical engineer, and was a very, he was an engineer's engineer. And all his life he admired German engineering. And so he was working for a big engineering firm in Denver, Colorado, and he wanted a Porsche because that was the best engineering. But he couldn't afford one. So he got what he called the poor man's Porsche. He got a Varga Cucina. And that's the word, it's Varga Cucina. I'm thinking, the Carmen Ghia, excuse me. I'm sorry. So he got a Carmen Ghia, and it was in 1961, and he drove it for 4 years, and he called it his poor man's Porsche. Finally, he saved up enough money that he bought a 1965 356C Porsche. And for the rest of his life, he drove it back and forth to work. Went on a few rallies, but then he died, and it got parked in my mom's garage for years and years. And meanwhile, I'm running around the Navy, and my father's passed away, and we were laughing. So every day she got in and out of her car, and she just opened the door, and the car door would swing open and put 1,000 cuts, 1,000 dents in the side of the Porsche. So by the time she finally says, "Will you come get that Porsche and take it out of my car? I don't want it in my garage anymore." So my mom gave me my dad's Porsche, but it looked like bullet holes all up and down the side of it. She had no idea of the value of a Porsche sitting there. And so I had it all painted. I had that painted out and all smooth today. And so I still have my dad's Porsche from 1965, and you got to see it. And I keep it all original. I keep the parts original, and there's no rust, and I keep it just running perfectly. So It's my memory of my dad. It's my it's the engineer's Porsche that he loved, that German engineering.
And when you polish it, does it connect with time?
Oh yeah. Well, I just that's I just connected. I guess that's my connection to my father. He was a wonderful example of my life and a wonderful engineer and so I just treat it with respect because that's him.
Beautiful.
Raise American flag.
Yes, I'm gonna do that. The other element, there's a couple other elements that I will shoot in the B-roll, and I'm just trying to get a little bit of language to go with it. We shot you through the American flag. We saw the reflections of the American flag. Maybe let's back up a moment before we get to the flag. And you live in one of the most beautiful states in the country, and this is when the settlers, the Pilgrims first landed at Plymouth Rock, I like to think that all those adventurers just kept pushing west, and what they were in search of, they found when they saw the Colorado Rockies. And this has been home for you most of your life, and you live here today.
Yeah.
From your back porch, you can look on the majesty of Pikes Peak. We'll go down in a couple days, and you'll be looking at the incredible red rocks and the
Garden of the Gods.
Garden of the Gods. What does that mean for you, Mike, when you look around at this beauty and you think about what you have now, what you came through?
Well, it's important to me. I mean, first we're here in the beauty of Colorado, where my family, they came as immigrants in the late 1800s in horses and wagons into western Colorado, which is the most beautiful Alp-like mountain, like Ouray. It's called the Switzerland of America. We have beautiful Alp-like mountains in western Colorado, and that's where I grew up, fishing and hunting and living in these beautiful Alps. Now I live in Colorado Springs today, where we see Pikes Peak, almost as nice as western Colorado. My background's here, my love of Colorado, my love of the mountains, love of the American flag. It's all rooted right here. So I'm back home, and I'm proud to be here. And of course, I'm proud of my flag and proud of my country and proud of the mountains. And we have a beautiful state, and I'm really happy to be here.
And you are an artist. You find yourself unable to not sketch.
Yeah.
And we're going to see you sketching some of the mountains. So can you speak a little bit about why you draw and what you see?
Oh, well, like you say, when I get a pencil in my hand, I want to make a little scribble. If I'm in a restaurant and they have some kids' Crayolas there, I'll grab the Crayola and I'll do a little sketch there by my dinner plate. It's just kind of fun to do, and I just like when I get a pen or a pencil in my hand. I tell people, I just laugh. Say, yeah, I can't stop my hand. My hand just has to draw. So it's just kind of fun. It's just able to do a sketch, and one thing what you have to do is relax and don't worry about the outcome. Most people will say, oh, I don't want to sketch anything because it might look bad. Well, artists, they don't care. It may look good, bad. We don't know what it's going to look like. But an artist just makes a sketch and press on with life. The amateur is afraid that they'll make something that doesn't look good. I guess I passed that point, and I just enjoy making a quick little sketch.
And freedom has to have a special meaning for you. What does it mean to you, sir?
Oh, well, we're in the freest country in the world. That we have the freedom to be successful or to be a failure. We can do anything in America, and we're the envy of the world. And I'm part of that. I just enjoy it. I can, if I want to learn a subject, I can. Well, now I can dig up the answers on the internet, and I can learn all kinds of crazy things just because it's there, and I have the ability. So I have the freedom to do that. If you were in Russia or China, you might not have that freedom to dig out new information and learn something new, learn about other countries. So I really value what we have in America, but I'm just fascinated by the exponential rate at which we're growing in our knowledge. Everything from YouTubes and to Wikipedia to Google, everything is just expanding at such a rapid rate that I want to be part of it. Even though I'm getting older, I still want to be part of it. So I'm fascinated by technology and how fast it's growing and where it's going. Now we're getting into artificial intelligence. That's going to be a fascinating, and we're getting militarily, we're getting into drones. Drones is a way of the future, and I'd like to be around and see that development.
And finally, that flag, you fought for that flag, you've been in prison for that flag, that flag flies over these mountains. What does that flag mean to you?
I can sum that up with how important it was in Vietnam. The first thing that the guys taught me to do when I'm alone, I'm on my back, I'm broken, they said, Mike, every Sunday we have a church service. When you hear the victory letter V whistled out the back window, he said, get yourself up as best you can, face towards the window, towards America. And they taught me to take a piece of toilet paper about that big and put a grain of rice behind it, sticky rice, and stick it on the wall, and that is your American flag. And we want you to stand at attention, salute that flag, hold your hand over your heart, and we all say the Pledge of Allegiance and the Lord's Prayer in unison throughout the camp. And we had a camp church service among dozens of rooms, all different around the camp unity. But that little piece of paper on the wall was our flag. Because if you made a real flag, you're going to get tortured. You're going to get beat up. But if they found a piece of paper with a piece of rice on it stuck on the wall, they wouldn't know what it was. So to me, that you talked about a flag, that's my flag. And sometimes when I give a talk, I'll take a piece of paper and I'll stick it on the podium and I'll say, this is my flag, and I'll give my talk, because that little thing, it doesn't have to have red and white stripes on it, but that little piece of paper is still my flag today. And it's very important to me. It was important in Hanoi because every Sunday I could put my flag on the wall.
Wow, that's amazing, incredible.
So let me just get an answer to that. Can you hold out your hand and show me about how big, hold up your hand and show a little tiny flag, hang on.
Yeah,
Yeah, don't move your, no, peek it, you did it vertically, the other way, yeah, like that, okay, hang on. Okay, so take your hand away for a second, and then bring it back and do that. Yeah, okay, great. And then take your hand away. Great, thank you.
Well, sir, that's my questions for now. That's just what I've come up with. If there's something that I haven't touched on that you would like to touch on, if you...
No, you guys are very thorough, and you've talked to a lot of guys, you got a lot of ideas, and of course you bring up ideas, and that brings up my ideas and responses, and I'm just glad I can help you, because I know where you're building up a history here, and it's going to be a thing of beauty when you get finished. So if I can help people in the future, and whether it's to inspire them or educate them or whatever, I'm glad I can help.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So the only thing left we want to do, should we cut for a moment?
Yeah, we
Bill?
should
Let me
cut.
You wanna do
Run
room
your
tone
tone.
first or no?
Yeah, we can get room tone. Let's go ahead. What we're going to do is 30 seconds.
Okay.
I think Bill explained it to you.
I got it.
Yeah. So we're going to do 30 seconds of room tone. And I'll cough now. Okay, cutting sound.
You guys know what tinnitus is?